No, you're not fooling anyone. You have done the things that needed to get done. You are in company of smart people. There are facts here, and you have been successful, and you will be successful again.
Hey, welcome to the Sales Squad Pod, the show that breaks down the skills sellers need to crush quota and advance their career. Hosted by Lisa, a top enterprise AE, Syreeta, a frontline leader, and Donna, a former leader of leaders. We met in the sales trenches at Salesforce. We're moms. We've carried a bag for decades. We've gone to club, and we've got you. If you're ready to up-level your game and career, let's jump into it.
So 4 years ago, I had just been promoted to the lead account executive of a Fortune 10 company. And I had just closed my biggest deal ever. It was 7 figures, and we had closed it in just 8 weeks. And even though I was being celebrated internally at my organization, instead of celebrating this huge win on an account that hadn't bought anything from us in 3 years, I remember feeling like someone was going to find out that I had just gotten lucky. I actually shouldn't be leading this account. And I realized I had this terrible imposter syndrome. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So what you can expect from this episode, we're going to look at the research behind imposter syndrome and its role on performance. We're going to look to see, does this feeling ever actually go away, or do you just learn to manage it? And then we'll talk about practical advice that you can start using immediately after this podcast. So let's start with what imposter syndrome actually is. The core mechanism is attributing your successes to luck, timing, the contributions of other people, and attributing your failures entirely to yourself. So Dr. Valerie Young, she's this co-founder of Imposter Syndrome Institute. She talks about 82% of people have experienced imposter syndrome. And while there's no widespread studies that I had found for sales specifically, it's clear that this feeling just resonates so deeply with a wide range of people. What I found really interesting from the research I looked at as well is that high achievers are the ones who experience imposter syndrome the most, especially in direct comparison to their lower achieving counterparts. I mean, in sales, that seems like a paradox because our wins are on display for everyone to see. So you would think that continuously being on the top of the leaderboard would probably equate to you being a competent person. However, the more successful that you become, the more pressure you feel to keep up the act. I think there's going to be magic in this episode how we hear about managing our own imposter syndrome at our individual levels, but I'm excited to dive into and chat about what your thoughts are on this research.
Sales is basically the perfect storm for imposter syndrome. Everything is always on blast, everything is always very clear, and everything is always aligned to some sort of dashboard and on display. Those public metrics, the constant rejection, the comparison culture that we live in, which is the leaderboards and the rankings. You can be crushing quota and still feel like you're one bad month away from being exposed. I love this topic because I'm feeling it right now. We're in a podcast together, Sales Squad Pod. Who would have even thought this would even have been a thing? And I have to constantly remind myself that you're doing a good job. And Lisa, Donna, if you're not feeling that today, I'm telling you guys today, we are doing a good job. I think it's important for us to understand that imposter syndrome is not a lack of competence or a lack of preparation. It really boils down to a disconnect between your capability and your internal narrative. What are you telling yourself on a regular basis, and what are you hearing from other people?
Syreeta, talk to me about what imposter syndrome looks like from a manager's seat when a rep is like objectively great. So they either keep self-sabotaging or they downplay their successes.
I do think that it is something that can be seen quite easily from a manager's perspective. I think it's important that you actually call out the pattern directly. Whenever I see the situation of a rep who is downplaying a lot of their work that they have done, I like to call it out. Hey, I'm noticing that every time you win, you seem to attribute this to luck. That's not what I see. So the first step for me is always making the invisible visible, letting them know that I actually can see them and that I know that they're putting in all the work. So if you're a manager today and you're noticing that some of your reps are maybe suffering from imposter syndrome, the first thing I would say is to call the pattern out directly. The second thing I would say is anchoring them in the data. It's a love language, I would say, in the sales world. Show the attainment trends, show them their win rates, show them the deal sizes. Like, you don't get lucky 6 quarters in a row. That's not luck. And the final thing I would say is just force the ownership. Instead of how do you think that deal closed, I like to put reps in a position of, what did you do specifically that made this deal happen? You doing your job exceptionally well, because let me connect the dots between who you really are and your identity.
So my hot take on this topic is, first of all, I actually hate the term imposter syndrome. That word syndrome makes it sound like this is a disease or something that you need to be cured. And I don't think imposter syndrome should really have that negative connotation. When you feel that sense of discomfort, that is a good thing. Lisa, to your point, as you get more senior, as you continue to progress your career, you continue to feel this. And the reason why is because you are pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. If you were complacent and just going through the motions, you probably won't feel uncomfortable. And I don't think that's where any of us want to actually be. So it's not a bad thing if you're feeling this. It's very common. So Syreeta, you mentioned reps that potentially downplay results. I actually think it's important for reps to demonstrate humility, to acknowledge that their wins are not just a product of themselves, but rather the contributions of the entire team. It's when that humility goes a little too far and creates a lack of confidence that that person cannot do it again, that they shouldn't have won, that they don't deserve the accolades. That is that fine line where that needs to be course corrected, where you do need to pump the tires a little bit for that type of individual. But I do think humility is good and discomfort is great. And so many of us should actually embrace this feeling of imposter syndrome as opposed to run away from it.
That getting comfortable being uncomfortable, yes, that means you're growing. And as you are feeling that, that means you're being stretched. And when does muscle grow? It grows when it is stretched, when it breaks. So I agree with that. I think what happens is when it starts to contribute to somebody who feels like I can't do this, I shouldn't be doing this, there's so much additional energy in feeling that way that it leads to burnout, that it leads to anxiety, that it leads to depression. So I do think that, yes, when you're in that growth phase and you're like, hey, this is unknown territory, but I can do it, versus, hey, I probably shouldn't be here and I don't belong. And now it's hurting my energy. For both of you both were AEs, you moved into management. Talk to me about the feelings of imposter syndrome as you continue to move up. Does it disappear? Are you like, hey, I made it? Or does it continue to show up?
So we talked on a prior episode. I was a people leader at American Express. I went to become an individual contributor at Salesforce, and then I got promoted into leadership again. What I didn't share on that other episode is the fact that I was 5 months pregnant when I got promoted into leadership at Salesforce. And I had an advocate of a hiring manager. Shout out to Michael Corey, who has had the most impact on my career of anyone that I've ever worked for. Michael hired me and promoted me to RVP, and I still remember us being in the conference room, him telling me the great news, and my reaction. I said to him, "Why me? Why would you select me?" And I was genuinely shocked. I was 5 months pregnant, and the candidates who I was up against were amazing. They were my mentors. So I could not comprehend why he would want me for the job. And I still remember what he said: because you are the best person for the job. It was so simple. It was this affirmation that I did deserve it. And even though I couldn't see it, I belonged there and I deserved the promotion and I was worthy and I would do well, which I ended up doing. Spoiler, I did well, went to President's Club as a leader. So yes, absolutely. I have felt it as I've moved up the ranks. And I think sometimes you need that person in your life to be able to hold up a mirror to you and show you what you can't see at the time. And Michael did that for me.
I love the story, Donna. And I think for the underrepresented talent, a lot of times it boils down to, do I actually even belong here in this room? Was I a diversity hire? Am I going to get exposed as somebody who is not supposed to be here? So what can look like a confidence issue can also show up as a safety issue. And what do we think about from a psychologically safe environment? How are we preparing to be in those types of conversations? I would say as a Black seller, a woman, an immigrant, all of this stuff just hits a little bit differently, because not only do you have that self-talk going on, you're also walking into rooms where people don't look like you. You're conditioned to not self-promote just from your upbringing, and you feel like sometimes maybe that one mistake can confirm the stereotype. So now you're not just selling or being that only person in the room. Now you're carrying the weight of representation. And so for those that are listening and watching today, mind you, I do see you, I do hear you, and I know you're tired of this, but I think the key for me is making sure that, my feeling is also valid. I constantly have that feeling, but the voice in my head is also reminding me that I do have the confidence, I do belong here. So please, for all of us, let's remind ourselves that the voice that we're talking to ourselves with should be the loudest voice, much louder than the one that's talking about why you should not be in the room.
Exactly. When it comes down to it, feeling like an imposter means you feel like a fraud. And if you are in a room and nobody else in that room looks like you, of course you're going to feel like a fraud. You're going to feel like you don't belong there because nobody else who has your profile, who has your background, who's done what you've done is sitting in the seat next to you. And that's why we as women or minorities, you tend to feel it more acutely. And knowing it's something to be expected is how we are going to push through it.
So the psychological safety anchor is actually something that the research points to say this is how you work through imposter syndrome. It's actually the number one thing that you are supposed to use in order to work through imposter syndrome. It is that memory of you succeeding or that person who is always pumping your tires. Syreeta, you spoke about it. Donna, you spoke about the person who had the impact on your career and how you feel when somebody is saying, no, you deserve to be here. So it can be a person, it can be that memory, or it can be evidence. We talk about this on another podcast as well, but we talked about the smile file. We need to start collecting receipts. Every time that you are successful, you are collecting those pieces of success and putting them in a file that you can go back to and look at and say, these are all the times that I've been successful. This is not a one-off situation. This is not a lucky situation. This is not a right timing situation.
I'd love to add another tactic that I've used to combat imposter syndrome, and that is taking the approach of the third eye. And what that means is taking a lens of the outside looking in to this situation. That can come in two forms. Number one, if my friend came to me feeling this way, what would I tell my friend? So take yourself out of it. You're now in the third person. And the second piece of that is taking a look at yourself and being more objective in your judgment. So take a video recording of you speaking. In the moment, you felt like a complete fraud, you lacked the confidence, you didn't feel like you were at your best. Now watch that video again and pretend you are not the person in the video. How would you assess that person? And think about the advice you would give the person, i.e. you, if you weren't so harsh and speaking to yourself with your inner voice, rather taking an outside lens looking in. I think detaching yourself from the experience is an important way for you to actually be able to be a bit more objective.
It's called cognitive diffusion. And they always talk about this during meditation. I remember when I had crazy anxiety issues, what I would do is I would meditate, and it talks about labeling this feeling, but as a feeling that is not attached to you. Oh, that's anxiety. And so when we think about imposter syndrome, it's really important that you label it. Hey, I'm feeling this way, but also saying, I am not that. There's reality and there is a feeling. And those two can coexist, but separating yourself from those things is really important.
As I also want to make sure to call out a couple of things that work well for me and for my team. If somebody feels that one mistake is going to be what defines them, they will always continue to play it small. What I like to do is normalize the misses, normalize the learning curves, and normalize that discomfort. I'm also uncomfortable in this situation. Let's work through this together. I think a lot of that psychological safety that we're talking about can come from putting yourself in a situation of it's okay to make the mistakes. And this one situation is not going to define the rest of my day nor the rest of my career. That's something that we use a lot on my team.
Syreeta, love what you just said and the fact that you are also feeling imposter syndrome. Can you talk to us about an example of when you felt it and what it felt like?
Boy, this is going to be a story. So I'll talk a little bit about my first couple of months at Salesforce. I was also, interestingly enough, Donna, like 2 or 3 months pregnant at the time, but nobody knew this. I was working on a pretty large deal that would have not just made my quarter, but made the year and given me the foundation I needed to feel comfortable and confident in taking my maternity leave after having shown up in the company just 6 months prior. So there was a lot of weight on this particular opportunity because I knew that I needed to close this deal. I was traveling to Florida at the time, and I had had prior conversations with this organization. We were prepared to be there. I had all the right stakeholders in the room, not only internally as well as externally, but it was going to be the first time that I was going to be meeting with the president of the company. Despite having communicated over email, we had never actually met in person. So this was the first in-person visit. The morning of the meeting, I looked in the mirror, I fixed my crown, said to myself, hey, you've got this. You've been working this deal for a couple of months now. It's all about finishing this off and having the right conversations here today. I prepare the room for the conversation. I put down the pens, I put down the notebooks, the typical things that you need in order to prepare for this room. As the company starts filing in, the president finally walks in, and I've been waiting months to see this person. He walks in, he looks me straight in the eye and says to me, oh, I'll take my coffee black, please. So the assumption was that I was there to help the room as opposed to being the person running the meeting today. The floor opened up from underneath me, as you can imagine. I was sweating. I wanted to get out of there. And my immediate thought was, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be in this room because this person and potentially the others in the room were considering me to be the help. And so this was a moment that I would say was pretty pivotal in my career when it comes to imposter syndrome. I have much gratitude for my manager at the time who was able to turn the conversation around for me and let me know that we still crushed the opportunity, we still crushed the conversation, and the deal, of course, did actually close. But it served as that reminder to me that no matter what room I walk in, because of how I look, I'm going to be judged. But that shouldn't take away from my capabilities and my ability to actually close a particular deal. So, go ahead.
I feel anger.
Yeah.
That's straight racism. I think we've passed microaggression. That's just flat out.
And these are the things that, people are facing every single day. I would say I've built a very strong wall since then and continuously build a strong wall. Knowing my brag book and my smile file helps me to keep things going. But I think the key here is that, unfortunately for us, I think we need to remember that imposter syndrome never goes away. And the environments that we work in will amplify them. But you as a seller, individual contributor, leader, there are many ways that you can overcome this, including laughter. And don't judge me, Donna, including wine. We push through and just keep focused on the smile file and the brag books, and those will help you get through what you need to go on to the next phase in your life.
You mentioned everyone's going through this. I said at the very beginning of this conversation that 85% of people have experienced imposter syndrome in sales. As the individual, I live and die by my success. And what feels good for me throughout this conversation and going through the research was understanding that you shouldn't feel lonely in the imposter syndrome because everybody is feeling it. And although in sales, as you mentioned, Syreeta, it is on blast because everyone can see your numbers. I think that those continuous wins that you can point to say, I was top 5 for 6 months in a row, I'm probably a top 5 person. I'm probably an A player, should help calm some of those fears as long as you're looking back at your successes. So what are some other things that we can do to push through imposter syndrome? We mentioned labeling it and that cognitive diffusion, using evidence, that smile file, the fact that you have done this before and you have the receipts to prove it. And then we also talked about that psychological safety anchor. It may be your manager who should be pumping your tires, or that person in your life who says, we've seen you do it before, you can do it again. Donna, what's one thing that you've taken away for imposter syndrome?
I think detaching is so important, as is self-talk. I love when Syreeta said, I fixed my crown in the morning. I did my affirmations in the mirror. Beyonce, when she goes on stage, she's not Beyonce. She's Sasha Fierce. And she has created a persona for herself that she will emulate whenever she's on stage. Similarly, if I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I have a negative Donna sitting on my shoulder, and that voice in my head is not mine, it's negative Donna's. So being able to detach yourself, manage that negative self-talk is incredibly important. The analogy I'll use is when you get a song stuck in your head on loop, the only way to stop it is by thinking of another song. And you have to replace that negative self-talk with something else. So you better make it positive.
Actually, Donna, what you just said, there's a book I was actually thinking about before coming into this podcast. It's called The Alter Ego Effect. And it is a way to get through imposter syndrome, Kobe has it, Black Mamba, Beyonce has it, as you mentioned. So many people have this alter ego that they're like, okay, when I'm ready to go on stage, I need to shed this person who is meek and mild and I need to perform. And you emulate whoever that person is that you want to emulate to come to the table and just push through. So, Syreeta, what about you?
Replace your feelings with facts. Data, just lean in. Your feelings are not your review. Your feelings are not what's going to get you to the next place, but your data certainly will. Start asking yourself, am I actually underperforming or maybe am I just uncomfortable? Lean in on those brag books, your quota attainment in sales, your win rates, your pipe gen, your deal size. There are so many things that you can brag about, and remind yourself that you didn't accidentally get here. All your files are going to show you exactly how you got here.
Yeah, you're not fooling anyone. I used to say, oh, I'm pulling the wool over my manager's eyes as I, close these multi-million-dollar deals. No, you're not fooling anyone. You have done the things that needed to get done. You are in company of smart people. To your point, Syreeta, there are facts here and you have been successful and you will be successful again. So thanks so much for listening. Let us know what you think of this topic. Let us know what other topics you folks are looking to hear. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Sales Squad Pod. We're building a community of serious sellers and leaders who want to operate at the next level, and we're glad you're part of it. If you found value in today's conversation, we would love to hear from you. Send us questions you'd like us to tackle in future episodes, and whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify, be sure to hit like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at Sales Squad Pod.